As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner YouGov offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. Let's talk about gaming intersecting with other things. I have a couple of stories where gaming is intersecting with other industries, and I think they're interesting stories. And the first one here is this is from TechCrunch, and the headline is Osso VR. Osso, I think that's pronounced. Osso VR raises $27 million to turn surgery into a video game. Basically, and I don't love the way it's already the article starts kind of down on VR. The author Lucas says virtual reality did not turn into the ultimate office replacement telepresence machine during the pandemic, and it wasn't for lack of trying. But some startups focused on employee training in VR have found added validation, blah, blah, blah. So they're talking about Osso VR startup focused on medical training. And the idea here is that you will be able to train surgeons without having, to use corpses and other things, other real life alternatives in terms of surgical training, and that they will be able to do it all in VR. This was a big round, 27 million Series B, led by GSR Ventures, Signalfire, additional participation from Signalfire, Kaiser Permanente Ventures, Anorak Ventures, among others. So pretty interesting. They've got some corporate VCs in there like Kaiser Permanente. But we're seeing gaming, and in this case VR, intersecting with healthcare in a very real way. Anyone think this is a big trend? Anyone think this will, who disagrees with even the beginning of this article, which is, VR has sort of failed to solve the office telepresence problem?
I don't know if I disagree with that. I think if you think of a moment for VR to have a watershed that's not game driven, it was the COVID era, right? Like you had real need, and for people to have alternate solutions, to have more to have more communication and better, richer communication from at home, right? And you saw runs on people were going out and buying hardware to enable this. There were like popular camera models for, like online learning were sold out, microphones were sold out, right? Like VR did not sell out, right? There wasn't a run on the index so people could use it for, so I agree that I think VR had a moment where it was called to see if it could be, something valuable or at least if it was its time now to be an immersive office software, and it didn't answer, right? I think, but that does not mean at all that VR doesn't have tons of awesome applicable use cases, training being one of them. I think it's a good example. And I think this is a case where, look, like it's difficult to train doctors, right? And doctors make a lot of money. So anything that simplifies or reduces the resource cost of the training, there's probably a high willingness to pay there on the other side. I think it makes sense. I think this isn't sort of the thing where like there's a lot of trainings that got put into VR that I wonder about, but this one seems a bit more intuitive, particularly because people have told me anecdotally that like surgeons, like amateur, like first year med students come in now way better at, basic surgery or basic surgical skills than they used to because of games, right? Like I think it's well known in the medical industry that people have better hand-eye because a lot of surgeons are coming in having game today. So I don't know. It's interesting, but it seems like there's a real synergy there.
No one? Sorry, go ahead, Jimmy.
I just wanted to add to that and kind of just add two anecdotes that I had in my life, which I think are parallel as well. As when YouTube was really on the up and up, I had a friend of mine that was in medical school, and he was working with some investors in creating a platform where they would film surgeries and put them on a shareable site like that. So to William's point, these med students that are coming in being a little bit more advanced or having that know-how. Additionally, and this isn't in medical, but a friend of mine owns about 40 fully immersive VR rigs, like those kind of like space pods that you hop into, 20 of them in LA, 20 of them in London. He has a deal with one of the history museums in Great Britain, and you can do one of those King Tut walkthroughs in Egypt. And I just, I love seeing stuff like that because it's this application of essentially what was gaming tech, but more so in history or in science. And so when I read this, I kind of disagreed with that first sentence. I mean, well, it's hard, because I know all of those VR rigs couldn't be used during COVID because of health and safety issues and because they were on loan here or there. And I think that was more a shot at the individual Oculus type units, right? But all I wanted to say with my anecdotes was I've seen really awesome integrations or overlaps or what have you in science, in history, in other areas, utilizing tech that essentially was created for gamers. And I think this is awesome. I can't wait to see where it goes in 5 years.
There's no question that the VR tech is good enough to drive some of these applications, like training surgeons, right? My question is, are there psychological barriers that remain? In other words,
yes.
Would you want to be operated on? Like, let's say you had a serious surgery, right? And somehow you know that before you go in for surgery, the doctor who's operating on you, he or she trained entirely in VR, right? Has never touched
right. There's
a
no
real human being.
Like I could see it now. Like, oh, don't worry. Like Dr. John is a pro. He has over 2,000 hours in Surgeon Simulator. Like he's good, Like,
yeah, Surgeon Simulator 3000.
Yeah, like you'd be a bit like, oh, like that's like a pilot flying you who's only ever flown in Microsoft, like.
Well, no, my simple view is that eventually that psychological barrier probably will disappear. Like 50 years from now, I guarantee people won't care that their surgeon only operated in VR before on them, because it mentally, I think, will have been accepted. The question is, do you guys feel there's a big barrier today? Jimmy M, maybe?
I think there's a barrier for the doctors themselves, right? Because I feel like there's just a difference in what you're operating on, like the tactile nature. I don't want to go into descriptives, but there's a lot. So I think, like probably 90-10% would be great. Like that'd be a great distribution. And I, as a patient, would feel comfortable with that. Where I was like, okay, he spent 2,000 hours in Surgeon Sim 3000, and then the next, 1,000 hours doing real people, like fine, or like whatever.
But like to the flip side too, like there is a first surgery, right? Like it's not like every doctor goes into the market having done 10,000. Like there has to be a first one,
right? I
guess if it's going to be my doctor's first surgery, I prefer that they've done 1,000 hours in Surgeon Simulator than like they're just starting. Good luck.
At least with the VR, at least with the VR training, you could have a very detailed readout about your surgeon, right? Like he's time played 635 hours, and like his scores, like
what clan is he in? That's all I care about.
What do you do if your surgeon doesn't have platinum trophies?
I want him. They're like,
wait, he didn't get the like sew him back up accomplishment,
right? Like what? He's missing that, doctor.
Lindsay, you were gonna say something.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that, to William's point, I don't think anyone just goes in cold on their first surgery. I'm pretty sure there's assistance for quite a bit from an experienced surgeon. So just so you know, William, if you ever have to get surgery, it's not going to be like their first rodeo all by themselves.
But my point still stands, though, is I'd rather have them had the VR training in addition to everything else, right? Rather, so it doesn't have to be a substitution. It can just be another tool in a toolkit.
Yeah, and that I completely agree with. And I think even though it's fun to make fun of the analytics they could receive, we all know that any feedback a computer gives is going to be vastly more accurate than a human feedback staring at it. So, I mean, to be quite honest, I'd rather have robots doing my surgeries because the margin of error for robots there is quite slim. But if the best I can get is a robot training a human how to do my surgery, then I suppose I'd take it.
It's true. Owen says, I think VR has a lot more growth to be done. I think some say it has failed because expectations were too high at launch from marketing as well as consumer. I mean,
accessibility.
Who here thinks expectations is part of the problem with VR?
Yeah, Game Boy VR was such a letdown. I've never.
No, is it that like we were promised flying cars and this is what we got? Like, is it that kind of effect? Does anyone think expectations are actually part of the problem?
Maybe to some extent.
in the gaming world, I definitely have noticed that. I don't know how that translates here to science, but I think that's a great observation.
I
I
definitely.
think that. Oh,
Oh, go
go
for it,
ahead.
Lindsay. No, go.
You first.
Well, I definitely think VR was marketed as like when the first generation stuff was coming out as like this is the watershed moment, right? Like it's ready, it's going to be immersive, and in some sense, I think maybe the displays were very good even from the beginning, but I think VR taught us there was a bigger problem to be solved than just the displays. And I think the industry made such a big wow. It is true. When you put on VR headset, it's impressive. You definitely are like, oh, wow, this is different. Like you're ready, but the problem is there's other gaps that hold it back. And I think the marketing was disingenuous about, hey, the displays are great, but we didn't figure out how you should move. You know?
Yeah, we didn't tell you that you needed a nuclear generator in your backyard to be able to run this thing like at 10 frames a second. Sorry. Good luck.
Robert says, I've created 3D stereoscopic visualization, OR suite, and VR is important for training the surgeons on neurosurgery, for example. Wow, interesting. My surgeon would have to be ranked diamond at a minimum, says Wade. That's.
I bet you could get a discount at gold though.
That's true.
Yeah, you know, a lot of those guys were a lot of the gold guys were just held back by the other surgeons in their training group.
It's like, I promise, man, it wasn't me. It was my team. It was my team.
Yeah.
Robert says AR headsets have overlays for surgery such as carpal tunnel to advise through the operation. That's
that.
cool, right? That is really cool.
That's so cool.
Robert also says developed in Unity, which is where the game architecture systems have such involved industrial and medical applications. No question, the medical applications I think are fascinating.